Kia ora koutou, ko Kate Rhodes toka ingoa, and welcome to this presentation about computational thinking in the New Zealand curriculum, specifically focused around primary school curriculum. So a little karakia to start us off. Kia ora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, he hura hei mā tata e te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e tātou katoa, hui e tāki e. Welcome, as I said, ko Kate Rhodes toku ingoa. So I currently work for the University of Waikato on the teacher training program, and I've worked here for several years now, and specifically I teach technology, and within that an interest area for me and my specialty is digital technology. Prior to this, I worked in primary schools and in Tauranga, and had a particular interest and specialty in digital technology. Now, I did work in classrooms. I wasn't a specialty teacher, and I worked in laptop classes where we needed to integrate a lot of digital technology, and I also did run robotics programs and coding programs in several schools as well. Also, just a quick mention to my co-presenter, who is presenting the follow-up video to this short video, and that is Melinda, and she works for Massey University in much the same role as me, and she also was a primary teacher for many years and has a lot of expertise in digital technology and integrating these into the classroom and integrating those into general teaching and learning. So today we're going to be looking at what computational thinking is, looking at some of the research that I've done and the teachers' experiences with computational thinking in that research, and then looking at a few activities which will include student roles, purako as meanings of context for computational thinking, and having a particular look at how unplugged and plugged thinking links into computational thinking in the classroom. So first off, computational thinking. What is it? Well, computational thinking is a human pursuit. It's not actually something that is done by a computer. Okay? So the thinking is something that takes place in a human mind. And yes, later on that might be something, computational thinking might create a set of instructions that we do put into a computer. But it's a problem-solving technique, and it is a human pursuit. And I think probably the most well-known definition of computational thinking is that by Wing, who talks about it as an approach to problem solving. So it's not attempting to make humans think like a computer. It's actually the human that's doing the thinking in a very specific way that then can be put into a computer. So computational thinking actually has a variety of definitions. So you can see here there are different authors who say there are different components of computational thinking. And although Wing's tends to be the most well-known definition, that's the one down the bottom, and hers includes 6 different components. Actually, the Angeli, which is the one just above that from 2016, is the one that really closely aligns with the New Zealand curriculum. Each of those are discussed in the New Zealand curriculum at some point. And a really great starting point with computational thinking with your classes is to unpack, to deconstruct what these mean, and I would start with Angeli. And if I had a little bit more time today, I could also do that here, but really looking at what is abstraction, what is an algorithm, what's decomposition, what's debugging, and what's generalization. There's also a variety of books that you can get out from the library now that have kind of a story developed around what each one of those are, and they're quite easy to find. There are lots of resources online, and there's also some great books such as this How to Be a Coder, which I can easily send you details of these. If you would like to email me, please feel free to. How to Become a Coder. And again, these are just unplugged activities, so activities off devices which explore all of these different components of computational thinking. So digital technology in the New Zealand curriculum. There are actually two different areas of digital technology in the New Zealand curriculum, and one of them is not part of the subject areas. So that's called digital fluency or e-learning. Okay, and that's using digital technology to support each of the learning areas. So you might be typing up your writing to publish it to a blog, and that would be just using digital technology in literacy, using digital technology in any component of the curriculum. You might be Skyping people to talk to them about a project that you're doing or anything. So any use of digital technology helps us to become more digitally fluent. And if we're digitally fluent, we want to be able to use multiple different programs, multiple different devices, and have some fluency with that. And so that we understand how things work, and it's easier for us switching between different things, okay? And understanding, having a bit of a critical and evaluative idea about how devices work. Now, from 2020, when it became mandatory, it was first introduced at the end part of 2017, we had two new components put into the technology learning area. So we had two new digital technology aspects put into the technology learning area, and those were computational thinking and designing and developing digital outcomes. Now, each of those two components are very heavily linked together. However, we're really just having a real focus on the computational thinking aspect of the curriculum today. So computational thinking, when that was brought made mandatory in 2020, they decided to use progress outcomes. Now, the reason they moved away from the achievement objectives was so that it would align with the new curriculums that are now coming out. And a few of them have already been released, and there will be more released over the next coming years. And they have progress outcomes. So it's a set of progressions that students move through. And as you can see in the highlighted yellow box, the progress outcomes don't actually sequentially align with year levels. Okay, so they do align with different levels, but level 2 doesn't even have one. So you might move from progress outcome 1, which you can see aligns with the later end of level 1, and then work on that throughout level 1 and level 2 of the curriculum, and then it's not until level 3 that you would be starting to maybe look at progress outcome 2. However, you might be doing that in the classroom prior to level 3 if you felt that your students were ready for it. Now, interestingly, it isn't until progress at outcome 2 that they start to actually talk about computerised concepts. So prior to level 3, so that's before level 5, year level 5, there is actually no specification in computational thinking to be using a device. And instead they advocate for using non-computerised concepts, doing non-computerised tasks, which might include or would include precise step-by-step instructions, which is algorithmic thinking. Okay, and after that they would give those instructions to someone, and then those could be debugged, so they could be looked at for errors. Over the years, I've done several research projects with teachers and looked at their experiences and their views on computational thinking. And something that 4 concepts come up all the time when we work with teachers. Firstly, that often it's believed that computational thinking is coding on devices and that it's really complex. Okay, often that there's very little professional development available, and if there is professional development, it's often a one-hit wonder. So they might spend 1 year looking at digital technology in the curriculum, and then moved back to literacy or back to numeracy, and it's not really given another thought for quite a few years. And often there's a real lack of how to get funding for this PD as well. Another issue is with all primary school areas we're time poor as teachers. There's so much information in the crowded curriculum that we're trying to get across to our students. it's difficult to fit that computational thinking in. It's just another aspect teachers are needing to fit in. And then alongside that, teachers saying that maybe they don't see the value. They don't see the value of it comparative to maybe teaching, the literacy, numeracy or other subject areas. Now, once teachers have been worked with, here's some of the things that they've commented on. A lot of them have talked about how they didn't really realise that there were non-computerised activity. They didn't realise that it's actually really simple, and that in some ways often they were already incorporating quite a few aspects of the curriculum into their practice, but they didn't really realise that that's what they were doing. The unplugged components, so those off the device, were really easy to integrate. And with many other activities we do, particularly with the junior children, they found the oral language activities and computational thinking fitted really well together, integrated really nicely together. Even in the senior school, this last comment is from a teacher who worked in year 5 and 6, and talked about how they really decided after they spent some time exploring the curriculum to spend a lot more time looking at those unplugged lessons and then consolidate that with the use of on-device tasks. So before and after comments from several from research. First of all, one teacher talked about how there are a lot of people that feel apprehensive because they just think it was really broad coding, where do you start, where do you stop? And then at the end saying, well, actually it was nowhere near as hard as I imagined. Others saying that got quite confused about exactly what the curriculum was, and then realising that actually it's not that difficult, it's not really complex, and it's not a complete overhaul. And then teacher 3 as well was particularly cautious and nervous about using digital technology. That wasn't their comfort zone. They had many other areas that they were amazingly highly skilled at, but digital technology wasn't something they felt really confident at. And afterwards, after they'd spent some time exploring it, they felt a lot more confident implementing it, and they also found that it really wasn't actually that daunting. They didn't need to know these complex coding tasks on devices. There were so many things that they could actually do unplugged. So here are a few activities that you could work with in the classroom. Obviously, keeping the video quite short, we're running through them reasonably quickly, but I am happy for anyone to email myself or Melinda and ask for a little bit more information. Okay, so one of the things that's really great to do is to give students roles when they're working in digital technology or particularly computational thinking. Now what this does, it encourages computational thinking more explicitly. Kayako can assign roles that align with individual skills and those that replicate the digital technology industry. It also gives the ability for students to work in teams collaboratively, which is a really great way to look at computational thinking, or it's a problem-solving approach. So solving those problems as a team, as a group, and working on that collaboration is really important. The other thing is that the students might actually solve the problems independently, but then it would be the collaboration of coming back together and looking at how each of them did that and working on why they did that and looking at the different ways that they might have solved that problem. So some of the student roles that we'd encourage, and once I show you some of the other activities, this will become a little clearer. So you might include the programmer, the kidbot, the fix-it, and the Yoda. If you have a look over on the right-hand side, you can see the associated computational skills that are associated with each of those. So the programmer would write the code, so they would be looking at, remember this doesn't have to be on a device, it can be unplugged. And there might be multiple coders solving different either chunks or both solving the same problem and then coming together and looking at how they did that. The kidbot runs the code provided by the programmer, so they run the code through or look at how it works. The fix-it is someone who analyses the code for errors and identifies solutions, and the Yoda looks for more efficient iterations, coding sequences. Okay, And something to talk about here is that debugging, so looking for errors. And I found that once we started to do this in our computational thinking, students start bringing that into other areas of the curriculum. So they started to bring it into their writing. Okay, what do we need to do now? We need to go and debug it. We need to look for errors. We need to fix it. That was a really great way to talk about this, not just we do one thing and then it's finished. We actually always go back and debug. So an idea for a first task that students could do, and here we've used the context of Maui and the sun. So what they need to do is they need to get Maui to the sun and they need to collect the Harakeke gate along the way. So a way that I quite like to start mine is actually giving students 3 different codes that they need to find the one that is actually incorrect, rather than asking them to write the code to start with, actually looking at them doing that debugging first. So which one of these codes is right and which one of them is wrong. So if you wanted to, you could pause the video now and you could have a look at that. The other thing to note here is that each code, every new set of new direction is on another line, and that's the same when you do step-by-step instructions. If you were writing instructions for cleaning your teeth or instructions for making a sandwich, you'd have number 1, get the bread. Number 2, it would be on a new line, and really encouraging that from the beginning is a really important thing to do with coding. And that's why I quite like giving them those codes that they can see at the start, because then they've got a model, they've got an exemplar they can use. The other thing to do is to write multiple different languages. So for example, code 1 might be written up, up, next line, right, right, next line, up, up, next line, right. Or it might be written times 2 up, next line, times 2, right. So there's multiple ways. You could use different symbols, you could have a key. So making them understand that coding language could take any form. It doesn't need to be in arrows. It could be written. It could be in different ways. It could be represented in different pictures. Okay, so task 2 and 3. So here you can see that our grid becomes a bit bigger. So straight away it's a more complex task for students to do. And here again we want the students to take on those roles that we talked about at the beginning, and we're trying to get Maui to the sun and collecting the Harakeke. Now there are multiple ways to solve this. Maui could go all the way to the left before he comes back across to the right. There's actually no correct or incorrect way of solving it. So the programmers and the KidBot are going to create those codes, and you might get 2 separate groups to create their own codes, and then you could also get them to each have a look at how they've done that. Task 3 would be to get them to swap with another pair, and they could debug each other's codes. And what we want them to also do is to have a discussion around why they did it the way that they did. They would also need to be very familiar with this myth, and that links into your literacy, looking at how stories are sequenced, checking that students know the order, what have they done to work out, actually this is the order. You might get them to complete an organisation grid before you do that. And you can do that with any story. You could link this into any topic. If you were doing like bees or anything that you were doing in your topic, you could create one of these grids on, or just getting students to create their own grids based on their own interests. But this is a really nice way to draw it into specifically like literacy and the sequencing of stories. So once they've completed that grid, and they've done an example that you've created and they've solved that grid, it would be nice to look at your own parako. Might be to do with any cultural representation in your classrooms, or any that are relevant to the Aotearoa context, and get them to deconstruct those stories, get them to create those sequences of those stories, and then they're going to create their own grids. Okay, so they're going to draw their own grids. Now remember that younger children make the grids quite small with bigger boxes, and older students, you would just make the grids more complex. Trying to encourage students to keep it quite simple to start with, and looking at different ways you can do it, making sure that the pictures, it's really clear what everything is. Once you've done that and each student has created their own, or maybe they're in pairs and they've created one around a paraco, then they can swap with a buddy group and get them to solve the code, have a go at solving, and they might find errors. They might realise that the pictures are not clear enough so that they don't actually understand where to go and why to go to which particular place. So having those discussions around why it worked and why it didn't work is really important, and it's going to really help unpack those aspects that are important and are not important in coding. Once you've got a few together, I'd also suggest bringing together a few different grids that are, and talking about why particular ones were quite good and why ones didn't work. A really common thing that might happen within this is that students will just take pictures from the internet and pop them on, and it's actually, when you use photos, it's really unclear what that photo is, so it's much better for them to use go into image and have a look at the tool and then look at the clip art type drawing. So you could get those students to do that unplugged, so you could get them to draw it by hand and just provide them the grid, or you could get them to pop that into a grid that you've designed online. So they're bringing images off the internet and popping them into their grids online. So most of this is really an unplugged task to start with. So the curriculum actually highly advocates, and there's a lot of research to show that moving from unplugged to computerised tasks is actually really important. You can see all these authors down the bottom that agree that this is a really important part of computational thinking. So even up into high school, doing unplugged tasks is an important part of or an important precursor to your computational thinking tasks, okay, that are on devices as well. So it's quite important not to miss that step, to try something uncomputerized, like off device, unplugged, and then have a go at doing it, so that the students can see the links, see how it works together, okay? And there's lots of benefits here of unplugged context before introducing computerised context. So unplugged lessons are more effective in promoting computational thinking than computerised tasks. Remember, computational thinking is a thinking done by humans, and it's a problem-solving technique. So jumping straight to those devices actually is not really encouraging that real problem-solving that takes place off the device before. Okay, exposure to computational thinking at lower levels of the curriculum actually makes computational thinking much more relatable, accessible, and it actually leads to higher self-efficacy. And there's quite a lot of research that suggests, particularly for females, that it's quite important to introduce them to those computational thinking tasks early on in primary school. Otherwise, by the time they get to high school, they've already decided, they've already created those gender stereotypes and realised that it's not something, or decided it's not something for them, because really they haven't had the exposure to it. Okay, higher levels of achievement in computer science later in secondary school are achieved by introducing this computational thinking early on, and linking computational thinking unplugged to then going into the plugged-in concept has been found to be the most effective way to teach computational thinking. So what you could do once you've done all those unplugged tasks, you can then jump onto some platform such as Scratch or another platform, and you can get them to put those grids in. So here we've got a dinosaur on the screen, but what you could do is you could get them to change that to the character in their story or whatever context you've used. If you've used a paraco, a local legend, or any other story, you could get them to bring in their character, and then you could get them to design a very simple game which is the same as the grid, where someone they have to put several different pictures onto the screen, and the person solving the code has to get them to take their person, so say Maui, across maybe to the right hand side to collect the flax, and then up to get the sun. Now, usually when I do teach this, I take people on how to use Scratch and different platforms, but there are lots and lots of those online, so it would be easy for anyone to have a look at those online. It's using Scratch or something similar is a great way to segue from that unplugged into that plugged in learning. And here we've got Scratch. Actually, you can see you just drag and drop blocks in, so it's quite easy. Now, with utilising Scratch platforms, particularly for teachers, often, as we looked at with some of the teachers before who've participated in the research, they've found it quite daunting to go onto Scratch in different programs. And I think one of the most important concepts to remember with that is to try and utilise that social constructivism. You do not need to be the person who has all the knowledge. In fact, saying to the students, right, you're going to go into Scratch and you're going to come up with a version of your grid in Scratch, and just telling them, I do not know how to do this, so I need you to all be the experts in the room. That is totally okay. And actually, some of the students that end up coming forward, coming to the front of the room and showing other students how to do things, it's really interesting who often ends up being the expert on these platforms. It's a great way to draw other skill sets out, and an excellent way that we can actually develop that ability of not always being that person who is the bearer of all knowledge to the students, but instead they are sharing their knowledge with each other. And teachers taking an active role in facilitating that is a really valuable, important, and a really interesting way to do. And I think the computational thinking and Scratch being that problem-solving technique, it can be done that way. Okay, so key points from today. We've looked at digital technology in the curriculum, and there are two aspects. So computational thinking is the thinking that takes place by a human when problem solving in computer science. The New Zealand curriculum indicates that computational thinking can be taught without a device until year 5. Unplugging, so without a device, computational thinking can be beneficial to both students and also the teachers at all ages, and has been found to be the most effective way to teach computational thinking. Providing context for computational thinking that reflects cultures and lived experience of students is important for engagement and retention of skills, and that's why we particularly looked at those parako today. Assigning student roles that emulate those in digital technology related industries is an effective tool for explicitly teaching of computational thinking, and computational thinking tasks can draw on the use of parako stories and local histories. So there's your local histories integration. We've talked about the integration into literacy there as well, and often oral language when you're using those unplugged activities. And cross-curricular approaches are easy in computational thinking and can help in busy classrooms. And the next video that Melinda from Massey has developed for us looks at just that. It looks at how you can develop an integrated cross-curricular approach using computational thinking. So thanks for watching. Please do email me if you have any questions. Ka kite.